What is going on, everybody? Car Guy V8 here, and today I've got a controversial video for you guys about the throttle body Swirlport heads, and I think that you have been lied to about them. I'm a huge apologist for these cylinder heads, and for some reason I absolutely love them. Now, before you say anything, I have a Cutlass and an El Camino with Vortec heads, and I also have a Cutlass with throttle body heads. So I have experience with both of these Chevrolet cylinder heads. So the Swirlport truck heads were first introduced in the 1987 square body trucks, and they continued through the 95 model year in the OBS Chevy truck. So there are a lot of these cylinder heads out there, and at the end of the video I will show you the quick, easy way to differentiate the TBI and the Vortec heads from each other. Now I'm going to tell you why I think these cylinder heads did not get a fair shot. So we're going to rewind back to 1987 when this newfangled EFI junk was first out, and then if you look past back in 86 and prior, you still had the 4-barrel quadrajet intakes, quadrajet carburetors. You were still living, in the good days. So guys, if they wanted a little bit of performance, they would look at these new heads like, well, you have to drill out the center angles for the intake to get an old intake to fit on it, or get a special one for the TBI stuff. And then they learned they don't flow quite as well as the old, say, 882, 624, very common truck heads. So guys that wanted performance, they'd be like, oh, get an old camel hump, get an old 882. You don't have to deal with these weird angles and everything. And then you go to, fast forward to like 95, 96 when the Vortec heads came out, which flow very well. Then you kind of have these heads stuck in the middle. They don't flow quite as good as these old heads, and they definitely don't flow as well as these new heads. So everybody's just like, just junk it, throw it away. I'm going to tell you why that's an unfair assessment. Just because these cylinder heads will not see the power numbers that you want does not mean they're junk. Just like with any engine build, you have to plan everything out in harmony. You want the engine to run perfectly, nothing out of place. So if you build an all-out race engine and you put these heads on them, the heads will be out of place and the engine won't make power. It's not designed for that high-end power. But if you build something spec specifically for these cylinder heads, I think it will really surprise you what they can do. I will tell you, they love single pattern cams. Their cylinder heads, the exhaust flow on them is not as bad as you would think. It's real similar to the Vortec heads. Even though the intake flow isn't the greatest, its exhaust is not that bad. So single pattern cams, that's where it's at with these heads. You want a very narrow lobe separation angle. I'm talking about 106 degrees, 108 degrees at the max. And that, of course, it's not possible to run that kind of LSA on a throttle body setup without immense work. So it would have to be carbureted. But the exhaust, you don't want the piping to be too big, but you want it to be free flowing. So very, a nice free flowing exhaust with a single pattern cam, a good dual plane intake, good carburetor. You'd be very surprised how well these engines will run, and having a converter that puts it perfectly, in the peak torque, which these heads usually produce a very good torque curve. So if you have like a 2500 stall, you will have a flat torque curve all the way through about 4800 RPMs, or these things really fall on their face. You can have a very good running setup with just those few things I mentioned. I've got one out there and we'll drive it here in a minute. So now I'm gonna let y'all in on the secret of these throttle body heads. And this is gonna be controversial, so let me know what you think in the comments. So just to recap, these heads, they have a shorter power band ending at about 4,500 RPM with a stock cam, or about 5,000 with the cam I've got in it, but I usually run it to 4,800. And they have a pretty flat torque curve. So that means that these heads, they do not require the gearing that a traditional hot rod build would. Like if you're building a high RPM screamer, you always want, say, a 410 gear, 3,500, 4,000 stall. You're trying to get up in the RPM to make as much power as you can as quickly as possible, and that makes you fast. Well, as weird as it is to say, this is similar, but it's almost the opposite. I have a small converter in here, which is a 2,500 stall, but it acts about like a 300 with these pretty sorry rear end gears. This came factory with a 241 rear gear, and the Turbo 400 has a 248 first gear. So really, your first gear in this is basically like second or third gear in most other vehicles. So that makes for a pretty pitiful, pretty sad combination, right? You'd think so, but I'm telling you right now, it is not the case. With these heads, from 0 miles an hour up to about 65, where first gear ends at 4,800 RPM, you are fully in the torque curve, and you are making about peak torque from 0 to 60 miles an hour in first gear. So you hit the throttle, and you are immediately in the peak torque curve. Now, you could go with 273s or 308s, and that will make it a little more aggressive. But if you were to use a 410 gear, this thing would just be out of steam so fast, I think it would really take the fun out of it. In fact, I just did a 0 to 60 test with this car yesterday, and it surprised me. I have to roll into the throttle for a full half second. I can't gun it right off the line. It will obliterate that right rear tire. And that is no joke. This thing achieved a 6.4 second 0 to 60 with an anemic rear gear ratio. And supposedly, you know, a very, very bad combination that most people would just throw into the junkyard. So I'm very happy with that. That shows me this car with these gears and better traction would be capable of a high 5, 0 to 60. And that is doing the entire pull in a single gear, which is crazy. It's so much fun. I'm sorry, I'm going to stop rambling about this. I love these heads. I really do. Let's drive this thing. So now here is the easiest way to tell the difference between a throttle body and a Vortec head. They'll both be center bolt valve covers. So a lot of people get the mistaken idea that, oh, it's a Vortec head. Not true. So the Vortec heads, they have 8 total intake bolts, all straight up and down. The throttle body heads have 12 bolts, just like a traditional small block would, but the center 2 on each side are at a different angle. You can also look and see, this is the traditional angle. That one, this is a throttle body head right here. You can see the different angle that it's at right back there. This is traditional, just a regular small block Chevy intake right there. All at the same angle. Now, a quick note, the Swirlport heads I always look for end in the last 3 numbers of the casting number 193. They are the ones with 64cc chambers. I always look for them. There are 191 casting number cylinder heads that they are 72cc chambers. So there's a little less compression with them, about 8.5 to 1, I believe, is what they are with a dish piston. These are all advertised at 9.2 to 1. So these have the same compression ratio as a Vortec headed small block. So in that aspect, they are the same. Well, guys, this whole video has been basically to say, I think these heads were unfairly judged. But y'all be the judge of that down in the comments below. Let me know what you think. I think that if these heads are truly as bad as they say, my car has no business being as fun as it is. It is straight up fun to drive. I love it. And also, these heads can put out some serious intake CFM numbers if you do some mild porting. Check out Charles' video on YouTube. He has some insane numbers he has gotten with these heads while keeping the Swirlport, which keeps its great torque characteristics. I'm talking about numbers that rival even the best ported Vortec heads, and that's not a joke. Check him out. He's got some great videos. That other engine you saw in this video, I've got some plans for it in the future. I don't know how soon, but at some point. But guys, I hope y'all enjoyed this video. Thank y'all for watching.